Here's a typical real estate promotion in the Antelope Valley. Again, I'm not picking on the Antelope Valley. This stuff is widespread throughout North America. It's a great example, though. The name of the subdivision that's going in is Independence. If you look at the sign, there's a little arrow facing up. It's shaped a little bit like the silhouette of a house. It's red, which in a lot of cultures is the color of prosperity and opportunity and good fortune. There's the bird soaring up in the sky. All of the emotional push buttons are there. But I want to unpack this a little bit. They're advertising 3,300 square foot homes for about $200,000 with the idea that this is going to give you independence. If you look at the physical place where these homes are being constructed and what it takes to actually live there in the way of infrastructure and support that's supposed to give you all this independence, it's a little bit hard to say this is actually an independent life. You need a water supply. This is a part of the world where water comes from hundreds of miles away, from dams in Nevada and Arizona and watersheds in the mountains north of San Francisco. It's all brought in with enormous amounts of very expensive public infrastructure, aqueducts and dams and giant pumps that push the water up mountains. You can't live in this place without all of that water coming in. I was corrected by a local who said that there is some water still left under the ground, that is a significant source of water for the community, but it got more and more expensive, so that at a certain point by the 1950s, the cost of pumping the water up out of the ground exceeded the value of the things that the farmers were growing. So it's not that there isn't any local water, it's just the cost of supplying that water from the dregs that are left deep down in the ground don't make it economical. Here's a shot of the sewage treatment plant, which is an unimaginable distance away from where most people live. I suppose there was cheap land out there and nobody was going to object to its location, but you just have to think about what would happen if you flushed your toilet and this plant wasn't functioning properly. These are the things that people don't realize about the independent lifestyle that they're buying way out on the edge of the city. These things keep you alive. Food. Food comes from California. The Central Valley produces some ridiculously large percentage of the United States fruits and vegetables and nuts. Not so much grain, but we do grow rice and things. There are questions about whether we can continue to grow a monsoon crop in the desert, but that's a whole other conversation. The food that the people here in the Antelope Valley eat has to be trucked in from a great distance. And again, this is not unique to the Antelope Valley. If you live in Iowa surrounded by corn and soy, you still have to import almost all of your food because all Iowa produces is corn and soy and some pork, and it's all exported out into the rest of the country and the rest of the world, and then Iowa imports everything else, including things like vegetables and fruit from California. So nobody is particularly good at feeding themselves no matter where you live. And that's another thing that you have to add into this whole concept of independence. There's electricity, which it generally comes in from high-tension power lines over the mountains, across the desert, over a great distance from centralized power plants. California gets most of its electricity from natural gas. It's about half of the electricity that's produced. And of course, natural gas is generally piped in from other places. A quarter of the electricity in California comes from nuclear power plants. We only have a couple of them. A couple of them have been decommissioned entirely. Somebody decided that it was a bad idea to put nuclear reactors on earthquake faults. Go figure. And then maybe another quarter of it comes from hydroelectric dams in the mountains, the same place that we get a lot of our water from, which is a really clean source of energy. It doesn't have to be imported, but it does interfere with the natural environment a bit if you like fish. There are problems with drought. If you have too little rain or snow melt, you have a double whammy. First, you have a water problem, and then you have to figure out how you're going to make electricity if there isn't enough water in the dam to run the turbines. So there are a lot of vulnerabilities here. In addition, there's the roadways. The federal government and the state government build these massive highway projects, and the counties are constantly struggling to keep up with the local roads. Mostly it's the maintenance that's a problem. There's usually money to build a new highway, but there's almost never any funding to keep it paved after 40 years. and the revenue coming in local taxes generally can't keep up with the cost of maintaining these roads year after year. If you want to get to a decent paying job, if you live in this part of the world, you almost always have to drive a long, long way to get there. There was an earthquake about 20 years ago, and the freeway, the primary road that connected Los Angeles proper to these far-flung suburbs was damaged, and people couldn't use it anymore, and it created a huge problem because people had to start twisting through little mountain roads, and a lot of people just lost their jobs entirely, or they had to move in order to keep their job, or they had to get rid of their job in order to keep their house. There were lots of problems there. So this idea of independence, you're really incredibly dependent on an awful lot of stuff that's completely beyond your control.